It is Friday, which means it's time for our roundtable discussion of some of the week's top stories. We'll take a closer look at today's unusual messages to Iran by Presidents Obama and Shimon Peres of Israel. We'll look at those troubling reports from Israel about soldiers who may have thrown caution to the wind and killed Palestinian civilians in the Gaza war. And then in Afghanistan, the Obama administration is considering a huge increase in the number of Afghan soldiers and police. Joining us once again, Carla Robbins, Deputy Editorial Page Editor of The New York Times, and Gideon Rose, Managing Editor of Foreign Affairs Magazine. Carla, nice to have you back after some time. Let me begin by saying Happy Nowruz to both of you. I bring this up because it is the new year in Iran, and today a major overture made on the part of the Obama administration and the President of Israel. How significant is this, Carla?
Well, first of all, we don't know the relationship between the President Obama's speech, which is going to be broadcast to the Iranians, and President Peres' speech.
You don't think they coordinated?
They're probably aware of each. I mean, how much coordination? We don't know. It's too early to tell about this. What's significant? I mean, President Obama's already sent this message to the Iranians in a television interview that he did a few weeks ago. The fact that he keeps saying it, this time, of course, he recognized the Islamic Republic of Iran, didn't recognize them diplomatically, but did use the name itself. There was a lot of good body language in it. So I think what's interesting is it's basically the ball is in the Iranians' court now. I mean, he keeps doing it, and the Iranians keep saying, we want more, we want actions, I think he's really put them off their game. They're so used to having the Americans as the enemy, and they're so uncertain internally about how to respond and whether they're willing to give up anything for good relationships, that at this point, I think, it's put the Americans slightly ahead in the game.
Gideon, what do you think of that?
Yeah, Nixon famously said in one press conference, you won't have Richard Nixon to kick around anymore. Well, Obama is basically taking away the American demon for the Iranians. You won't have the United States to kick around anymore. This is significant as excellent public diplomacy on the administration's part. I see no downsides to it whatsoever. Will it actually change Iranian behavior or lead to a giant overture and breakthrough in relations? Who knows? Maybe. I would doubt it, because there are real interests in dispute here and continue to be so. But it's a smart, savvy move, both substantively and politically, in the way that Carla was saying.
How about the Israeli message? I mean, in conjunction with this.
The Israeli message is interesting, and I would love to hear more about the negotiations internally in Israel behind that, because they're a lot less comfortable opening up to Iran than the Americans are, and particularly with the new administration coming in. So the Israelis might be doing this as, oh my God, we have to avoid being seen as the lone bad guy blocking better relations, but I can't believe they're all that eager for talks with Iran.
It comes at a time when Israel is facing a great deal of criticism and also some isolation. Yesterday, the Israel Defense Forces announced that they were launching not one but two investigations into how their soldiers acted in the Gaza war. This after it came to light that they may have acted very inappropriately, at least as much as you can given a war. How serious is this for Israel?
Well, the investigation and the quotes that we've seen so far that were leaked to the Israeli newspapers are very disturbing, because they were briefed, supposedly these soldiers saying they were briefed and basically said, go for it, kill people, don't worry about killing civilians. And what we know is that there was a large number of civilians killed in Gaza. How many civilians is of dispute between the Palestinians and the Israelis, but there were some very horrifying things. Now, war is by nature a very horrifying thing, but when you have, as we have had as Americans in Iraq, the stories of things that have happened in Fallujah and in Abu Ghraib and a variety of other places, these are pretty horrifying accounts, and it is bad. It's bad for the Israelis, and it's just bad for the cause of peace.
Is the blame higher, though, because it was Israel, as opposed to, as you point out, the United States, where the killing of civilians was quite significant in the last 6 years?
Well, I would say it's actually both Israel and the United States are held to a much higher standard than their opponents. I mean, let's not forget that the people the Israelis were trying to go after in Gaza regularly and routinely blow up citizens and civilians deliberately as the target of their actions. So it's not like the Israelis were being worse than the people they were attacking. The problem is that they were engaging in warfare in highly populated areas and knew that the operations they were engaged in would end up having significant collateral damage. And the problem, it gives Israel a real black eye, because it may be unfair that they are held to a higher standard, but they are. And so
But they're a democracy, and they are a symbol to the world, and they have described themselves as a symbol to the world the same way we have described ourselves as a symbol to the world. So we should hold ourselves to a higher standard. And the Israelis, I mean, Gideon makes a very good point. I mean, they are fighting terrorism. They are fighting people who want to destroy them as a nation. At the same time, double standard or not, when you're a democracy and when you pose yourself as a highly moral state, you have to tell people that the war is a nasty thing, and there has to be very, very clear rules of engagement and restraint to not kill civilians. And what these guys are saying basically is they were told that not to worry about it. Now, whether it's true and how many people had that experience, that's what the investigation is supposed to turn up.
I agree with everything Carla just said. It's also
As you always do.
It's also worth pointing out that these investigations are run by the Israelis themselves. And again, that would not happen on the other side.
Before we run out of time, let's turn to Afghanistan. That's being studied now is bolstering the security forces. That would be the Afghan army and the Afghan police force. The Obama administration considering this. Why? Because the NATO forces and the U.S. troop commitment is not going to be enough?
Well, I mean, the Americans are having a terrible time getting more of the Europeans to play. That's a big thing. But also for long-term stability, what they're basically saying is that Afghanistan has to have its own, a large police and a large army, because the Taliban is much stronger than anyone ever expected it to be.
A character in Shakespeare's Henry IV says, boasts about being able to summon spirits from the vasty deep, and his opposing character says, yeah, so can I or any man, but the real question is, will they come when you summon them? We can talk about building a 400,000 person police force in Afghanistan and paramilitary forces, but I don't think you're going to see anything remotely like that actually emerge. It's too expensive, it's too difficult, and the real question here is, given that the problems people are talking about are real, and they're not actually going to be solved, how do you cope with the instability and lack of control the government has on the ground?
I don't know if they're going to pay. People will probably come.
That's the last word. Thank you, Carla. Pleasure to see you again. Gideon, always good to see you. Thank you both.